Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining me for another edition of Deborah Kobylt Live. We're just going to get right to our guest today. Thrilled to have her on the phone. We've got Gloria Allred. Gloria, thank you so much for being here.
Well, thank you for inviting me, Deborah.
Thank you. Gloria Allred, attorney and human rights activist for 4 decades. You've been fighting tirelessly, Gloria, for the rights of women, gays, people of color, and so many others. You know, Gloria and I were on a panel. The issue is with Alex Michelson. Do you remember that just a couple months ago?
Yes.
And I have to tell you, what impressed me about her walking out of the studio was your gait. You were a woman with somewhere to go, and you just never stop. I mean, and that's one thing that I noticed. You were on your way to do something else for somebody else, and this is just your life and how you live. It's really incredible.
That's right. I'm a very busy lawyer. I work during the day, nights, weekends, holidays. I have the honor of representing many people who have had their rights violated, and I'm determined to win as much justice as is possible under the law for those victims who have the courage to stand up for their rights.
Well, when we were on that panel, we were talking about Brett Kavanaugh, and we all know that he's been appointed since. But the issue was talking about keeping women's rights and making sure that we keep our rights. And I know this past week or so you were with Ruth I always mess up her name, Ruth Bader Ginsburg. What are we going to do to make sure that we retain the rights that we fought so hard for in the Supreme Court?
Yeah, Ruth is, of course, one of the wonderful role models and sheroes of many, many women and some men. She is an Associate Justice of the United States Supreme Court. She has been for decades a leading voice for women's rights and for minority rights on the Supreme Court. And she's responsible for many opinions on the court which have been supportive of women's rights. And even before she ever went to the Supreme Court, she, as a lawyer, argued many cases involving rights, women's rights before them. Yes, rights, Deborah, women's rights, minority rights, are very much at risk with the elevation of Judge Kavanaugh, now Justice Kavanaugh, to the United States Supreme Court, because he is known to be extremely, extremely conservative. And we all saw him testify at the United States Senate Judiciary hearing in which Dr. Christine Blasey Ford, also testified. And we saw him really, in many people's view, not display a judicial temperament. And so we're very concerned, especially because he took the seat now vacated by Justice Kennedy. Kennedy was a swing vote, often leading 5-4 decisions on the Supreme Court. And often he was very progressive on civil rights. So we're concerned now that there'll be a turn to the right, and that many, many rights that we have fought for or won, like the Roe v. Wade decision, are going to be even further cut back, reversed, or significantly restricted. That, of course, is the 1973 decision in which the United States Supreme Court decided that abortion is a constitutional right at certain stages of a woman's pregnancy, and that the government may not interfere with that right. And it's been cut back severely over the years because right-wing people have never stopped trying to challenge it and stop women from having availability and accessibility to legal, safe abortions.
This is why it's so important who we go out and vote for. And look what just happened in the recent elections. It was an historical turnout. We have more women in office than ever. And only 100 years ago, we weren't even allowed to vote. So we've come a long way. But in a way, we're really are only just starting. Only now are women even having the guts to get up and the courage to get up to run for office. We're still in the baby stages of all this.
Well, you're absolutely right, Deborah. And of course, now in this last midterm election, we saw a record number of women running for and being elected to office in the Congress in particular, and in the House of Representatives. Almost all of the elected women are from the Democratic Party. And I do think there will be a significant change because women are now taking many seats that were previously held by men. By the way, we are still, however, a minority in the United States Congress and in the United States Senate. So, but I do think this is certainly progress, and also more women voted this time than ever before.
Let me
and
tell
there's
you.
a huge gender gap between the parties. The majority of women appear to support the Democrats, and it's men that mainly support the Republicans and Donald Trump.
And I am someone who will vote either way, depending upon the issues and depending upon the person and depending upon what they truly stand for. But more than ever, these past few elections, I've never seen it so divided in my own lifetime, really. It's the extreme right. And then I feel as though the left is more toward the middle, but the right is more toward the extreme, in which case it's very difficult for me to vote for anyone in the Republican Party. I tend to vote now for women. I want to get women in office, unless it's Sarah Palin. I will, for the most part, go for a woman because I think that we need to make a stand. We have to, and that's the one way to make sure. I'm concerned about Ruth. I really am. I hope that her health stays with her. How is she doing? Do you know?
Well, I had the honor of being able to sit with her at dinner right next to her and have a wonderful conversation during dinner.
Yeah.
Her mind was 100% clear.
Yes, it is.
And, we had a very great conversation, which I'll basically keep private, but wonderful conversation. It was, my dream to be able to have dinner one day with Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and now I have been able to do that. And she went up to her office after the dinner. The dinner was over about 9:00. The dinner was at the U.S. Supreme Court, and then she was going up to her office, and there is where she fell and cracked 3 ribs, and then had to be hospitalized. But she's out of the hospital now and on the mend. You cannot keep Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg down. She's very resilient. She's faced a lot of health challenges. She's 85 years old. But this is a woman who intends to keep doing her job, at least for the next few years. She's made that clear. And this is a woman who does push-ups every morning. I couldn't begin to do anything like what she
know.
does.
I see
and
her.
I'm younger. So you're not going to keep Ruth Bader Ginsburg down. She's going to keep speaking her mind and doing her job.
No, I mean, there's not a lot of, if you will, badass women out there. There's not. Of course, there's you. There's Ruth. There's Gloria Steinem. Do you know her well? I mean, do you?
I do know Gloria. By the way, I was honored I think it was last week or the week before, when InStyle magazine made me their Badass Woman of the Week.
I know. I saw that. That's great. But
I thought that was very funny.
There's not a lot. I mean, honestly, especially of a certain generation. I mean, you guys were coming out fighting every day for the issues.
Well, yes, and you see it in my Netflix documentary, Seeing Allred, which is streaming on Netflix. We're just very happy that it's.
That is
100% positive reviews on Rotten Tomatoes.
Yep. Let me just say, everyone needs to go and see this. Do you understand? On Netflix. It is a wonderful documentary. I believe that you're going to be attending your screening in New York, and this coming Wednesday. Of course, I was going to wait till the end of our conversation, but what the heck? This coming Wednesday, it's going to be at the Landmark here, right, in Los Angeles. Yes,
the Landmark Theater in West Los Angeles on Wednesday night, and I'm doing 2 screenings in New York, and I'll be doing a question and answer after the film at the Landmark on November 21st. I'm very thrilled with the film, and it was an official selection of the Sundance Film Festival. Out of, I think, a couple of thousand documentaries submitted, they selected, I think, 16 to be their official selections, and we were very fortunate to be one of the 16 out of the thousands that were submitted. So all credit goes to the producers, Sophie Sartain and Roberta Grossman and Marta Kaufman, who co-created
Oh,
Friends.
she's outstanding. Yeah, and and the credit also goes to you, Gloria Allred, because it's about your life and about your work. A little bit about your life. You're born in Philadelphia. Dad Morris was a salesman, right? And
Yes,
mom,
door-to-door.
pardon?
Door-to-door salesman, the hardest kind.
I know, right?
To
Could
go
you
to each door and knock on the door and try to sell something, and then go to the next door.
What was he selling?
He was selling enlargements for photographs.
God, back in the day.
He never made very much money, but he worked very hard, and he was out there working 12 hours a day, 6 days a week. On the 7th, he prepared for the next 6.
Yeah, I know that because my dad worked 3 jobs just to get us through school.
So you know how that is, and that's why you and I both really appreciate people who work hard for a living and long hours, maybe doesn't earn very much, but feels a responsibility to support their families. And, you know, they're heroes, and I'll be forever grateful to him and to my mother, who was a full-time homemaker.
Mom Stella, that's right.
Yeah.
But did you always have, if you will, balls of steel? I mean, were you like that as a kid? I mean, you go out and you fight. You don't care if people don't like you. You want to be heard because it's an issue you strongly believe in, particularly women's rights. What were you like as a kid?
When men are strong, what I say to them, instead of saying you really have balls, I say, wow, you really have breasts. you know, so that's what I say to them. I don't know. I always spoke my mind. I didn't have battles to fight when I was growing up. I was very fortunate to go to an all-girls, all-public, all-academic high school in Philadelphia High School for Girls. And we were told that we were going to be the leaders, the next generation, and they really treated us as though it was a private school. And, you know, I always looked around and I said, me, how could I ever be a leader? I mean, my parents only have an 8th grade education. I'm here in this school with daughters of lawyers and elected officials and bankers and, you know, very prestigious people in Philadelphia. I even thought it was a mistake that they let me in and I should leave, and they wouldn't let me leave.
So
and
what?
They said, you belong here, Gloria, where you're not leaving. I didn't know then that I couldn't leave, that I could have left if I wanted to. But they said I couldn't, so I believed them. And it was a very good thing because, as it turned out, as a result of my being there, I was able to be admitted to the University of Pennsylvania, and that helped me to be admitted ultimately to law school, and the rest is history. But the point is, at that time, which is back in the cave age, long before you were born, Deborah, you know, girls were supposed to think about getting married, not having careers. And we were told at that school, look, you girls, you're going to have careers, and if your husband says, send me to medical school or law school or veterinary school, you just look at them and say, no, you send me. And we always thought that was really radical, and that our counselor, our vice principal, was maybe going to be arrested for talking like that. But that's the way they talk to girls high, and they really, and actually I've kept in touch with a number of the girls in my class, and they did, in fact, become the leaders. One of them, a friend of mine, became a wonderful medical researcher in the area of AIDS. Another one went and became an author and a professor and lives with very poor people in their huts in Panama to learn what it's like to really be poor on a day-to-day basis, and not just from an academic point of view, but what is it like in your life to live like that. I mean, they became amazing people. And so that's the difference a good education can make, and did make in my life.
And supportive parents. And you went to the University of Pennsylvania. We joked a little bit that you and Donald Trump, and I said, did you go there at the same time? Did your paths cross? To which you said,
and he went there a few years after. He went to the Wharton School, which is business school.
Right.
I only took one class in the Wharton School.
Mm-hmm.
I never saw him. I don't think that the Wharton School wants to have much to do with him at this point. I don't think they want to be associated with him. I could be wrong. I've heard that.
Oh, I've heard the same.
Having said that, I've been honored. The University of Pennsylvania has invited me to be a commencement speaker, which I was at graduation at the University of Pennsylvania a number of years ago. And actually, one of my screenings next week is going to be at the Penn Club in New York. So I have a good relationship with the University of Pennsylvania. I don't know that the president is actually welcome there at this point.
So much is happening. You have covered so many of the most notorious trials. Amber Fry, the former girlfriend of Scott Peterson, the family of Nicole Brown Simpson, who was brutally murdered by O.J. Simpson, dozens and dozens, and most recently, of course, one of the victims in the Cosby case. A lot of people have said,
and we actually represent 33 accusers of Bill Cosby.
Yeah, I mean, there are
and
hundreds.
Four of my clients testified in the criminal case, and of course, yesterday I was back in court on the civil lawsuit, which we filed against Bill Cosby, and that is a case where we represent Judy Huff, who alleges that she was 15 years old when she became the victim of child sexual abuse by Bill Cosby at the Playboy Mansion. And that case, we now have, as of yesterday, we now have a trial date of October 7th next year for our trial in the civil lawsuit. Mr. Cosby, of course, is in prison, convicted of 3 felonies in Pennsylvania, and he has been classified as a sexually violent predator.
Boy,
but we want to proceed with our civil lawsuit to win justice for our client, Judy Huff.
But many people have said, oh, she only takes on the high-profile cases. And I said, first of all, that's not true. But second of all, that's very, very important because it has brought to the very forefront of the media the attention of just what's been going on in our society against women, against gays, against people of color, and other ethnicities. I think it's brilliant to do that because you have truly changed the face of the way people, men and women, are looking at our society and how we've lived. I think it's incredible. I applaud you for that. But my question is, we have so much more to go. Who's behind you, if you will? Like, who do we look forward to in 20 years and 40 years or even 100 years? How do we keep this momentum going?
Well, there are many more women lawyers now practicing law than there were when I started practicing back in the 70s, because I've been doing this for 42 years. We're the leading women's rights law firm in the United States and have been for all those 4 decades, a private law firm. And we've won hundreds of millions of dollars, I might add, for our clients. But we are now seeing more women, but not a lot of women lawyers at the top as partners in law firms.
Still.
And the importance of that is it's the partners who decide which cases are taken, not the associates who are employees of the law firm. I have been working through the National Trial Lawyers to start a women's rights project. And we are we have invited women lawyers from across the country to be part of this. And what we want to do is build a network so that women in all of our states will know who they can contact if their rights have been denied, whether it's sexual harassment in employment, problems in family law, child support, child custody, whether it's civil rape, child sexual abuse, sexual assault. I've been flying around the country, and I'm on airplanes a lot, co-counseling with lawyers in many other states, and I have an office in New York as well. But working with lawyers to, so that we have experienced lawyers working in this area to assist women to assert their rights, because there's no point in having rights unless they can have access to lawyers who will help them to vindicate their rights. You mentioned, Deborah, that 100 years ago women didn't enjoy the right to vote. It took us 72 years to win the right to vote. We didn't win it until 1920. Now we are working to win the passage of Equal Rights Amendment to the United States Constitution. It's taken us 95 years, and we still have not won the passage of the ERA. Equality of rights under the law shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or any state.
I don't think people realize that. I don't
Mm-hmm.
think people realize that. You know that? It's true. We haven't won that yet.
And that's the guarantee we need.
Mm-hmm.
The only place women are mentioned in the United States Constitution is in suffrage, the 19th Amendment, in which we won the right to vote. We don't have equal rights for women legally.
So what do we do?
In the United States Constitution.
What do we do? How does that get changed in
we
almost
are working, many organizations in many states are working. We have one We needed 38 states to ratify. We now have 37, but the problem is there was a deadline, and if we get 38, we're gonna have to challenge the deadline, which, by the way, was not put on ratification of most amendments to the United States Constitution. But lo and behold, the deadline was put on for the Equal Rights Amendment. Talk about double standard, double treatment.
What's the state that's...
We're going to have to challenge that,
Wow.
but we're working. We need one more state now to ratify.
I was going to say, what's the state that's most likely to sign? That's worth spending our time in.
It's hard to say. We're just working in a number of states to try to do that. But Nevada did ratify. I think it was last year. And, Illinois just ratified after Nevada, and that, I think, was last year. So we need one more, and, we're not going to stop until
Gloria.
we win it. But the idea that it's taken us 95 years and we still don't have it, it's absolutely outrageous. There are forces that want to control women, that want to keep them subordinated legally, that want to keep us as second-class citizens, and we're just tired of it. And we want to assert our rights because we want protection for our daughters.
Couple of things. Why? In other words, we're the gateway to life. Nobody gets here unless they go through us in the first place. I often say that, and I think, why? What's the need for the control? I just want to ask you as a humanitarian. Tell me in your words.
Why do men want to, not all men, but some men.
Not all men. There's a lot of good guys out there, too. There's a lot of good. We've got to include the good guys, too. I think a lot of them are.
I've had the same male partners for 42 years.
I know, and they love working with you. I mean, they couldn't say.
Well, I'm very lucky, and that I always say, that men of quality are not threatened by women of equality. That's a saying in the women's movement, and it's very, very true. But some men are, they just want to dominate women. I say, male chauvinism, it can be very appealing at first, but it's very dangerous to a woman's health because it means that male chauvinists want to control women. Mm-hmm. So it's dangerous to women's health, and it's also dangerous to the health of a man who's a male chauvinist.
They'll never see that. I think the way to get a change is to go to the men who do, and the men who do and the women who are out giving the good fight, because I think the men who have no interest in seeing it or believe that the other side is, if you will, nuts, I don't think they're reachable. It's like, do you think you can reach your president? Just curious. So I think the ones to reach are the ones who believe this. Do you know what I mean? And I believe if we lock hands.
The key is you have sons, and you have told me that, essentially you've raised sons to respect women and to understand that women should have equal rights. Well, that's what we all need to do.
100%.
With our sons, with our grandsons. And, the younger generation, I think, is more, in general, more progressive because they haven't grown up with some of these stereotypical ideas about women.
Well, my boys always say...
We have a long, long way to go, though.
Well, my boys always say to me, Mom, I don't care if I'm working beside a woman or a man. It just doesn't matter to me. My professors are male. My professors are women. Same with my teachers. Thank God they don't feel the same way. They just don't. But I do believe it does come from where you go to school and also, how you live your life at home. If they hear that kind of talk at home, let's face it, they're going to mirror that. So you're right. But, look where we live. We live in Los Angeles, and they hear about this all the time at school and at home. But,
and there's a lot of, but let's also understand there's still a lot of abusive women out there. And speaking of schools, that I have this case. I represent more than 50 women, 50, against USC, University of Southern California, and Dr. George Tyndall, who was the gynecologist there, and we allege in our lawsuit that he engaged in sexually inappropriate conduct when he was examining some of these young women students. For many of them, that was their first time they've ever even been to a gynecologist, and that he engaged in certain discussions and certain practices in his medical care that certainly did not meet the standard of care that students had a right to enjoy or to be afforded by their gynecologist. So the worst part of that is, that we also allege that USC knew there were complaints about him and his conduct as a gynecologist towards the students as far back as the early 1990s.
Okay.
And yet they allowed him to stay there.
Why?
And
I just need to ask that question again.
That's
Why?
an answer. That's a good question. Why? And we're going to find that out because in our lawsuit, we're going to be taking depositions of certain individuals at USC and who were in positions of power, and we want answers as to why he was not terminated or not disciplined appropriately, not always monitored, not always accompanied by a chaperone when he examined these young women, and, why nothing was done after they were alerted that he was taking photos of women's genital areas, and, which we think he had no reason to do. And so we're very concerned, and we want answers. We not only want compensation for our clients, we want the truth. We want answers. They have a right to be able to know the answer.
Are we going to get the truth? I mean, look what happened with the Olympics. Also disgusting with that doctor. People knew, and they just let it happen. I don't understand that. It's just as easy to get rid of the guy and hire someone else. I will never understand why. I think people were afraid to speak out, especially women. Women today are still afraid to speak out. I was involved with something. He still is in the workforce in a very public place. And even I don't speak out because in a strange way, I don't want to get involved and speak out publicly. So if I'm somebody who doesn't want to speak out, imagine somebody else who doesn't have a voice. Do you know what I mean? That's what we have to change. People need to stand up and not be afraid. Do you know?
Well, there are real risks in speaking out, Deborah.
Yeah.
And when people come to me and they say, should I speak out? Should I file a lawsuit? Should I enter into a confidential settlement? What I do is I explain to them the benefits and risks of each option. And then it's up to them to decide what is the best option for that particular person. I don't say speak out or not speak out. I let them know the risks and the benefits. For example, there are people in the Me Too movement who've gone on the internet and then they accuse, like a famous celebrity, of raping them. Well, sometimes a celebrity then hires a lawyer who then writes to the person who put that on the internet, you have just defamed my client. You will cease and desist from doing it, take down all your posts, or I'm going to sue you. And sometimes celebrity does sue them for alleging that they've defamed them by accusing them of rape, which is a crime. And so even though ultimately the woman who says that she was raped might be able to prove she was raped, maybe she could, maybe she couldn't. Meanwhile, she's got to hire a lawyer to defend herself in a defamation case. That could cost hundreds of thousands of dollars, which most of the time she doesn't have.
So what do we do?
To pay for legal fees. So I'm saying there are risks. We do a lot of confidential settlements in our law firm, what we call pre-litigation settlements, where nobody even knows except the other party that we're alleging that the other party did something wrong to our client. And often we're able to settle those cases and nobody ever knows what the allegation was. But it's really up to the client to decide what's best for her or for him, because sometimes men are also the victims of sexual abuse.
You're right about that, men. And again, we have to remember there are good men. And if we partner with the good men and you and all the good women out there, we can make even more headway. You're called the godmother of the Me Too movement, which is true. In 1 year, I feel like we've really gone far. But again, let's look ahead 50 years, 100 years. Where do you want to see us in 100 years? Neither of us will be here, but what are you hoping for?
Well, what I'd like to see is full equality for women, equal protection, equal rights under the law. Again, we have another saying in the women's movement, men their rights and nothing more, women their rights and nothing less. So full equality is what we are working towards and what we are seeking. And I don't think that's too much to ask, and I think it's long overdue. So that's what I'm looking forward to. And whether or not I live to see it, I hope, that my daughter, my granddaughter, if I ever have great-grandchildren, that's what they are able to enjoy. And, it makes sense because women are a terrific asset to any business, to government, in sports, in the entertainment world, and then each and every aspect of life. in science, there's no reason for us to be denied our rights in any sector. The goal is to bring women into the mainstream of American life in equal partnership with men, legally, politically, economically, socially, in every aspect of life.
And to those who are still hesitant and don't want us in there, what do you say to them? You know what I say to them? Give it a try. Put your guard down and give it a try. What we contribute is actually very different than men. We're equal, but we also, in many ways, think so differently. We can think broad because we're forced to do that even just by being moms. And, we multitask all day. I mean, what we bring in science, what we bring in technologies, hardly any women in technology. But once
that's
we're...
why the STEM programs are so important.
Mm-hmm.
To train young girls.
Right.
So that they can also aspire to jobs in technology. And that's so important and into all areas of life. And, fields that are mainly dominated by men earn more than any field that is mainly dominated by women. And so it's important for there to be integration of the genders, integration by sex in all areas of life so that women can also have access to earning a decent living.
What can each man and woman do tonight, this week, to help this move forward, to help you move this forward?
Well, I would say, speak out against injustice. I do many, many cases of sexual harassment for victims. If a man sees a woman being sexually harassed on a job, speak up and speak out. And let the harasser know that, wait a minute, that's not okay what you just did. It's not okay for you to have grabbed a woman's breast or to pinch her in the butt, it's not okay to tell sexist jokes. It's not okay to get her drunk or, put a drug in her drink and then take her home and rape her. It's not okay to always just have men at the top on the jobs and women in the middle or the lower ranks, or to deny them the pay, the title, or the responsibility.
Right, and
they should be entitled to enjoy.
Right, and I also say to women, be smart, don't take it, and speak out. We've got to speak out. That's very important, and not be afraid. Gloria Allred, thank you so much. Tell me this week what you're working on, what people can look forward to seeing, and of course, once again, about your Netflix documentary. Would you, before we let you go?
Well, I would say that, just invite everybody to, if you would like, to come to the screening of Seeing Allred at Landmark Theater in West LA, November 21st in the evening, you should contact Netflix if you'd like to come. And then in addition to that, I would say you could also see it streaming on Netflix. And there are lots of cases that I'm going to be working on in the future. I'm sure everyone will be hearing about them. We're going to continue to fight the good fight for justice for women and minorities, and it means it's very important now more than ever.
And I'd also like to say you do take on all cases, and if someone feels like they would like to have you represent them, they can get in touch with you at your offices. And if for some reason it's not right, you always refer people elsewhere. I mean,
I do try to do that, yes, and they can contact me just by going to GloriaAllred.com. And they can look up on my webpage, and they'll have contact information. And whether they're in Los Angeles or New York or elsewhere, we will respond to them and either try to assist them, or if we can't assist them, we will try to refer them to someone else who may be able to assist them. Because everybody should have access to justice, and that's what we're there to work to do.
Any foundations quickly or women's groups that you strongly support that you would urge others to get involved with?
Well, we have a group called Women's Equal Rights Legal Defense and Education Fund.
Mm-hmm.
I'm president of that, and we always need support. But, it's that wonderful saying of Mother Jones, don't agonize, organize.
Mm-hmm.
If you feel deeply about some area of women's rights, get involved in that area. Get involved with the National Organization for Women, or if you want to run for office, contact the National Women's Political Caucus, and they will help you. So there are many groups that are out there. They all need your help, whether you're a woman or a man. Live your values. Gloria Steinem often says you can tell a person's values by looking at their checkbook, their check register. So live your values, contribute your time, contribute your money, give your support, speak out on the internet, support of women and women's rights and minority rights, and then we'll be able to win a much more fair and more just world.
Gloria Allred, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it more than you know. I look forward to coming to the screening of your film. And to everyone else, again, you can watch it on Netflix. And Gloria Allred, again, thank you. Have a wonderful weekend, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you. And you too.
Thanks.
Onward and upward. Thank you, Deborah.
Always,
Bye-bye.
always, Gloria. I'm so honored that she got to spend time with us. I really, I forgot to ask a question to her. This always happens to me. I forgot to ask one question. Are there any cases that she's taken on that she regrets? But you can't think of anything. Next time, I'll ask her when I see her next Wednesday. I know it's the night before Thanksgiving, but I really want to attend this screening. I really do. I find her interesting. She fights so hard for people, whether you agree or not with some of what she does. She's made a difference. Thank you for being here. We'll see you next time. My next show is very, very interesting, so stay tuned. We'll see you in a little bit. Bye-bye.